Genesis chapter 32, verses 1 and 2. And Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's host." And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. And our subject is the effectual prayers of Jacob. And we see the two great prayers, some call it one, but two great prayers related together in this magnificent narrative, this great chapter. 20 years after his original departure from his home, and now he's on his way to complete his journeyings, and he has the blessing and promise of the Lord with him. But he's afraid, as the narrative will go on to say. He's an old man, as is Esau, his brother, who is in the narrative before us, and Jacob is terrified of him. Esau is sworn to kill him, and now he is going to meet him after 20 years, and what will take place. But here's this tremendous assurance at the beginning of the chapter in verse 2. He sees the angels of God, a mighty host, in a vision, waking or sleeping of some kind, but the angels of God are said to have met him. And the name, Mahanaim, means double camp, two hosts, whether that means the angelic host and his own great company. His own company was mainly his servants and his flocks and his herds, and there were very many of them. It was a tremendous company. How many servants would he have had? How many shepherds? How many herdsmen? Many, I would think, but it was nevertheless a peaceable company. But the angelic host represented power that was with him. And probably that's what it means, two companies, the angels and his own earthly company. And verse 3, Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother in the country of Edom. And he announces his return, and it's immensely diplomatic, and it will be accompanied by a massive homage or present. And people say, some exegetes, well, this is extraordinary. He gets this tremendous assurance. The angelic host is with him. He has the promise of God in his heart and the vision of angels to set his mind at rest and to show him he's under the certain promise and protection of God. And yet he immediately begins to make earthly provisions. But I think it's quite wrong to look at the passage in that way. He sends the messengers, he organizes the gifts that he's going to send, but he takes every earthly precaution. He's afraid. Is that faithlessness? Not necessarily. Let's not be too hasty. Fear is a natural human reaction to times and events of great danger. Fear comes in. You cannot necessarily help that. It would be a lack of faith if, as a Christian, it didn't put you on your knees and lead you to prayer. But it isn't a lack of faith to be afraid. That's wholly natural. That's to recognize the threat and its size, its scope. So I don't think it's quite right to fault Jacob at this point. He does two things, but it reminds you of Cromwell. Trust in God, he would say to the troops, the order, and keep your powder dry. You've got to take earthly precautions and take care of your situation at a human level, but you depend upon the Lord to bless you and to use these provisions. And that's just what Jacob does, and he isn't in any sense rebuked or reproved for doing it. Now, he deserved rebuke, and he obtained it over many years for what he had done when he was at home with Isaac his father and Rebekah his mother in swindling the birthright out of Esau. He knew it was to be his. That had been revealed to Rebekah at his birth. But to take the law into his own hands when he thought it was slipping into the hands of Esau, who had become Isaac's favourite son, and he was going to get the family blessing, to take it into his own hands and to get it dishonestly, that wasn't making legitimate earthly provision. But now that's exactly what he is doing. He's acting most reasonably and cleverly. So he speaks very diplomatically, and in verse 4, I have sojourned with Laban and stayed there until now. And the Hebrew which is translated stayed there has very much the flavour of have been retained there, as though the words suggest that it was against his better judgment and his will. And that's how it was, of course. He was defrauded into remaining and stayed, but you could read been detained there until now. I have oxen, asses, flocks, maidservants, women servants. And he asks for grace, favour in the sight of Esau. He's obliged to him. He knows he has a debt to him. He's willing to pay and bring this homage, this massive gift, which is now organised. And he's impelled all the more to do that after verse 6, when he gets the news of the messengers sent to Esau returning. Also he cometh to meet thee, and 400 men with him. And it's quite right and reasonable to assume that Esau had murder in his heart. 400 men suggests fighting men. What were 400 men doing with him? Unless he came with violent intentions. And verse 7, probably much more was said, transmitted than is recorded here. Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided the people that was with him, flocks, herds, camels, into 2 bands. And then he seems, as the narrative goes on, to divide them further, from 2 bands into a number of droves of animals ahead, to make an offering, as it were, an appeasement to Esau, to acknowledge some indebtedness in his past conduct and apology. But he feared this wouldn't be enough, even as he made these provisions, and in the middle of them, verse 9, he goes to prayer. And this is what interests us most of all. And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac. And we just pause there. He goes right back to Abraham. This is the God of Abraham, the God that called out Abraham and delivered him and forgave him when he strayed and blessed him mightily and gave him the promise not only of a land and of a vast number of descendants, but the best promise of all, the special descendant. Abraham carried in his loins the seed royal. He would bring forth in due time the Messiah. Here was the great descendant promised in the Garden of Eden and repeated to each of the patriarchs, the Shiloh who would come. O God of my father, the God who blessed Abraham and protected him and kept the seed royal all the way, and Isaac too also, and guided and blessed him. And the Lord which saidst unto me, we learn from this, when it's a time for earnest prayer, this isn't emergency prayer necessarily, when you've only got a few moments in an emergency, but when we've time, let's go back. Go back to when you were called. Go back to Christ when he was on earth and the plan of redemption and what he did for millions and millions of people and how he redeemed them in mighty and everlasting love. Go back to that, my God and my Saviour. Then how he dealt with you. Remember your testimony. Remember the great forgiveness. Remember all the things that have happened ever since, and the great answers to prayer, and the way that he's brought you, and his patience and his love. O God of my Father, the Lord which saidst unto me, return unto thy country. Lord, you called me to take this journey which I now take, Jacob thought to himself. And you said, return unto thy country and to thy kindred, and the great promise, and I will deal well with thee. We're called people, called out from the world by Christ, by his Spirit, called to live for him. And whenever we need to call upon him earnestly in prayer, we say, Lord, you called me and saved me and undertook for me, and I believe and trust with all my heart that I will be kept and strengthened and seen through whatever is before me. Return unto thy country, to thy kindred, and I will deal well with thee, and we learn the way to pray. But look at verse 10. I am not worthy of the least of all thy mercies. Do you think that's in prayer? Lord, I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies. What's the least? Well, that's for you to figure out and decide. But select something, perhaps something which is not the least. I am not worthy, if you say this, of my wife or my husband to have been given lifelong with me, a Christian woman, a Christian man, or these children. I am not worthy of the least of thy mercies, or this provision that I have for life, which I often grumble about and feel it isn't enough, or it isn't quite appropriate, or it isn't right. What I should be more profitably thinking is, I am not worthy of these provisions which the Lord has given to me. And I'm certainly not worthy of the big blessings, worthy to teach a Sunday school class, worthy to preach from a pulpit, worthy to witness for him. I am not worthy. Come to the Lord always with that. How much of our grumblings and complaints and sorrows and sighings would be shamed away. Lord, I am not worthy of the least, not only of thy mercies, but of all the truth over the 20 years in Haran, all the truth. And we say that too. The truth I've been given, how little I witness, how little I speak profitably to others, how little I proclaim, how few I attempt to reach. I am not worthy to have been made the custodian, the possessor of so much truth, so many spiritual lessons and blessings of light and understanding. What have I done with it? If I were to be called to account for how little use I've made for all the truths which I've been shown, or how little I've meditated on them and allowed them to lift me up and strengthen me and bless me, how little I've reflected and thought and valued the truths that I've been given. And you can see the prayer of Jacob. I am not worthy of the least of all thy mercies and of all the truth which thou hast showed unto thy servant. That's his prayer. For with my staff I passed over this Jordan. That's all I had. That stick, that staff. And now I am become 2 enormous bands. And then the prayer itself, verse 11. Deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he will come and smite me, and the mother with the children. Now that's most important. Note that, the mother with the children. What is Jacob most afraid of? What does he find hardest to understand? It's this, that God, who preserved the seed royal right through the life of Abraham, with all its hazards and its journeyings through strange and hostile places, the God who delivered his father, Isaac, may take the privilege from him. It's the seed royal that's got to be protected. I can divide my company into 2 bands, thinks Jacob, and I can say, if one goes first, then Esau is violent and they're destroyed with the mothers and the children. Then at least I've got the other one, the other band, and they can run away. But will the seed royal be preserved? Because I don't know who he is and which band he'll be in. And this is the matter of greatest concern to Jacob. That's why the mother and the children are prominent in this. This is what he's concerned about. He thought, by the way, probably, it's his presumption, that the seed royal would be with Joseph, the best boy. But actually, the seed royal was with Judah. He didn't know which son carried the seed and which of his children it would be. So the provision of dividing his family into 2 groups wasn't necessarily going to work. Deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, lest he smite the mother with the children. Verse 12, and thou saidst, I will surely do thee good, and make thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. But what he really had in mind was the next bit, which isn't quoted. And through thee shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. The Messiah, the seed royal. Well, the prayer for the moment ends. It isn't finished. But for the moment, there's other business. Verse 13, he lodged there that same night, but it was a busy night, and took of that which came to his hand, a present for Esau his brother. He'd obviously sent his staff among the flocks and the herds to look out so many animals as a present for his brother. And as they're brought in, he makes his selection, checks them out. There's nothing imperfect, nothing faulty. From verse 14, the numbers are given. It's quite a considerable act of homage. Verse 16, he delivered them into the hand of his servants, every drove by themselves, however many were there. This gift would come in installments so that the appeasement would take effect. Pass over before me and put a space betwixt drove and drove. And he commanded the foremost. When my brother says, whose are thou? Where are you going? To who do these belong? This is what you'll say. And no doubt they all said the same. Verse 19. That was what was set up. Verse 20, say, moreover, behold, thy servant Jacob is behind us, for he said, I will appease him with the present that goeth before me, and so on. And he rose up that night, verse 22, took his 2 wives and 2 women servants and 11 sons, and passed over the ford Jabbok. It was low at that time of the year. It could be swollen and vigorous, but it was low, probably about 30 feet across and shallow. Verse 23, and he took them, sent them over the brook, and sent over that he had. And he was left alone. He'd gone back. And there wrestled with him a man with him until the breaking of the day. It was dark. All he could tell is that it was a man. A mysterious wrestling. He was obliged to wrestle and fight. It is the angel of the Lord. This becomes evident to Jacob, verse 30. After it was all over, Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face. He hadn't, of course, it was dark, but in some shadowy form he had, and he'd certainly felt his power. And my life is preserved. And that astonished him. But back to verse 24, there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day, for several hours. And when the angel of the Lord, who is Christ, a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ, when he saw that he prevailed not, he allowed Jacob to persist. He touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was immediately out of joint as he wrestled with him. And the angel said, let me go. Why did the angel of the pre-incarnate Christ, who is omnipotent and all-powerful, have to ask, let me go? It was God's way of communicating to Jacob that he had allowed Jacob to prevail in his asking over him. The mystery of God. God is sovereign. Yet he has so ordered things that he inspires us at times so to pray, and then like a father pretending to wrestle with a little child, God yields to our prayer. What an astonishing thing that God may be prevailed upon by us, our prayers having been heard before the foundation of the world. God in his sovereignty allows that to happen. Let me go, for the day breaketh. He mustn't be seen. And Jacob says, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. He knows, really, he's his superior in power, in strength. He is God. And the angel said unto him, What is thy name? He knew, of course. But Jacob has to say, Jacob, why is this? Why does the angel of the Lord demand his name? Why does Jacob have to articulate his name? Well, I tell you what I think the answer is. It's because Jacob's name was something less than worthy. It was not an ideal name. It was quite an unsavory name. His name was Supplanter. Supplanter, the one who seizes the property or substance or reputation or whatever of another. That's not a very nice name in some ways, but it's all right in human society. Nobody pays much attention to the meaning of the name. But now that he's wrestling with God, with the angel of the Lord, it's suddenly embarrassing to say, my name is Supplanter. It reminds him of his past. It reminds him of what he can do. So it's a wonderful blessing that follows. The angel of the Lord, verse 28, says, Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. Israel. For as a prince thou hast power with God. Israel, one who has power with God, is the meaning of the name. For as a prince, as a victor, hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. And Jacob asked him and said, Tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And the angel of the Lord says, Wherefore is it that thou dost ask after my name? In other words, may I suggest to you, what he really meant was, you know perfectly well who I am. And Jacob did know. And he called the place Peniel, for I have seen the face of God. And the angel of the Lord blessed him there. We don't know in what words or how, but it was more than enough. And Jacob called the place, verse 30, Peniel, for I have seen God face to face. What a marvelous expression. In the Ten Commandments, the first commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me. The Hebrew is exactly the same as here, before my face. I have seen God face to face. Real prayer almost sees the face of God. It becomes so intense and personal, and it has this assurance bound up with it that God has heard us. I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. Oh, just look at the intensity of this prayer. Why did the angel of the Lord wrestle with Jacob? Why did God seemingly, when Jacob was at prayer, put up his hand and say, you must struggle, you must agonize, you must plead, you must cry out for help, you must be truly repentant, you must appeal to me with a believing heart, you must plead for this blessing. I will not hear a slight, superficial, easy cry. Now I suggest that many or most of our prayers are quite easy, and there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes God puts up his hand, and you've got to be more in earnest, more longing, more trusting. And this was such an occasion. Perhaps pleading for souls is such an occasion. Perhaps praying for a family member, praying for a certain individual, praying for an act of witness, praying for a great endeavor, praying for a visitation in the community, praying for a great undertaking. Perhaps these things all require something more than just, Lord, bless our effort. And you feel you've almost seen God face to face. This is the lesson of this passage. There are prayers which are delightful, praises and petitions, and there are some prayers that are so important, we better really be in earnest. I think that's what we're learning here. Stop. Begin to plead. And he receives the blessing. But, just one last comment. Verse 25, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And that continued with him. And he limped somehow, always after that. Now, he was an old man anyway, but they were surprisingly active in those patriarchal days, even in their aged lives. Maybe he couldn't run anymore. I don't read that it was painful to him, but it was a limitation. It was a hindrance. And it was part of this. God put a limitation on him, even as he was prevailed upon. He puts a limitation on us when we're really earnest in prayer. God can do anything. It may take any shape or form, but I want to discuss only one shape, one form. Even the duty and the delightful duty, but the arduous duty of prayer is a limitation. When you and I decide to pray more, and to pray more earnestly, and to labour in prayer, that is itself a limitation. You may be losing, in Jacob's case, a whole night. You may be losing a half an hour a day. More lost. An hour a day. Where are you going to get it from? It's your restraints. You're a limited person. This is an arduous activity. So now, like Jacob, even in the continuing of an earnest prayer, you've got a limp in your life, a limitation upon you. And yet, it makes us 2 or 3 times the person, because God can use us all the more. Maybe you need to pray especially hard for sanctification. Maybe there's a problem, a sin, a defect which you can't overcome. And you're going to have to pray more and more earnestly about it. But it won't be a loss. It won't really be a limp in the end, because in answer to your prayer, God will overcome your sin. You will have to make the effort, and He will give you the strength. Maybe a person, maybe a ministry God has given you. That's the message of the passage. And we'll gladly take on whatever burden God attaches to the activity of prayer, to have His blessing. That is everything, and every great work needs earnest prayer.